What is going on, guys? Braden Flynn here from Film Supply Club, and going to be doing something a little bit different where we're all quarantined, confined, can't really go gather with people, and we love to bring on other people and go on shoots with them and be able to inspire you, challenge you. So in the midst of that, we thought we'd bring on some people, have some conversations, hear what they're up to, how they're doing it, and yeah, really want you to be exercising this creative muscle. Something that I've been saying a lot around a podcast called The Photo Report is we've been given this gift of time. You can always find silver linings in things. This is hard. Some of us are out of work, but in the midst of that, there's a lot of silver linings, and hoping that you can find them, hoping that you can still stay creative. And this series is going to be helping to do that. So without further ado, bring it on Wesley. Well, Wesley, so stoked to get to have a talk with you, man.
Yeah, nice to see you, man. I think you have a slightly better, more advanced setup than me, but not a
I don't
competition.
know.
Right?
You got your nature background, but wanted to bring you on because you are someone that I just view as really like brilliantly creative. More so, like there's a lot of people that are photographers, but you have a different background than a lot of people, and that's curation. And can you just like tell us a little bit about your background and that? Like you worked at stuff like WeTransfer, which is like, what would you do at WeTransfer? But selecting all those cool backdrops you see on WeTransfer. But yeah, what's your background?
Um, well, my original background is actually photography, then curation, and then now photography again. But the curation part, for a number of years, I think about 4 years probably, I was the North American curator for WeTransfer, like you said, which was amazing. I got to discover all these interesting visual artists, whether it's designers or illustrators or photographers or even some video folks like moving image things. And yeah, it was incredible. It was wonderful. I think I did almost 3,000 features in that period, because what WeTransfer did, in case some of the people watching don't know, is they give back part of their ad inventory to artists, to the artistic community that they serve, that they want to support. So their business model is that they make money from the ads that are in the background of your download screen. But at the time, I'm not sure if it's still the same number. At the time, 5% or so of those backgrounds from the ad inventory were taken out and given to artists, and I was the person curating it for the North American market, which was a wonderful thing to do, because it's like I was like Santa, because what you get to give to the people that you curate is like crazy amount of traffic, because WeTransfer at the time already was such a well-used product that a lot of people would click on the background and find their way to the artist's website instead of to the company who was advertising in my case. So that's something that I did for a number of years. And then a little bit after that, I started curating for the International Center of Photography in New York City. I was brought in to help with what we call the new voices in concerned photography. Concerned photography is kind of like what ICP is all about, is part of their founding ethos because of the way it started. And so in the definition of concerned photography, the way I have been able to use it is that it's photography that concerns itself with the world, that has a social angle to it. So within that, it's still very broad. It could be war journalism, which the founder of ICP did, and his wife as well. It could be, currently like photos of the nurses, like my friend Sinna is taking in New York City. It could be about women's rights. It could be anything that's socially engaged. And my role in that was that I got to focus on the new voices, because of course it's such a incredible institution that the main spaces are reserved for like legendary people like the Elliot Irwins of the world and the Bruce Davidsons of the world and Lauren Greenfield. And so my element there was the new voices, and I did about 100 exhibits that I curated for them. And right now I'm working on some interesting ideas to see if we can do some new stuff together as well.
How fun. And how do you feel like the curation that you've done has influenced the way that you're now a photographer?
What did I now what?
That you now photograph, or the way that you're a photographer?
Well, I think whether it's curating or reading a ton of photo books, or just any version of taking in a lot of great work, the more photos you see, the higher your visual literacy becomes, and the higher your visual literacy becomes, the hopefully the idea is the better you become as a photographer, the better you get at noticing things. So because it's been such a wide spectrum of work that I've gotten to see on my desk, whether it's curating or just studying, it's helped me kind of like find my own voice a little bit, and experiment and come up with like different concepts. But I think specifically from the curation point of view, it's taught me to learn to think in series, in projects. So rather than in individual photos, which there's nothing wrong with that, it's just like a different way of shooting. I'm now kind of thinking more in a form of series, and in the form of projects, and how I can tell a story, both in a series of single images, but also in a series that together forms a body of work.
Love that. And that's one of the things that I've really just loved about your work. One is that it feels like there are series where you've actually been living in different countries for periods of time, which have those been sort of your mini series? Or yeah, I guess talk about some of your series that you're working on.
Well, one thing that I've been doing in the different, before COVID, I was traveling quite a bit, and in each city, I would do a lot of street portrait photography, depending on the culture. Some cities weren't so into that, like Berlin, not a great place for street photography because they have a lot of rules, and they will tell you about them too. And so, but other places, Tokyo, Mexico City, Barcelona, they were great for street photography. And then specifically, like what I like to do is actually have a conversation, actually approach people, as opposed to the form of street photography that's kind of more like merging with the street and shooting snaps, which I also love, but I tend to go more for the conversations and the connections. So that is something that's kind of an ongoing thing, I guess, as soon as we start being able to travel again in our beautiful world. And that's kind of a little bit of an amorphous project, because it's not like I'm setting out to do a specific thing. It's just that is part of my routine, that I try to go out on a daily basis and do that for a while. Again, not at the moment, of course. Now I have something else going on, but because just from the way the world is right now. But that's one thing. And I have various projects going on where I just very slowly am putting them together. And right now, what I'm doing is I'm in Vancouver. I'm in this really lovely neighborhood that is super quiet. It's right next to a forest, and it has a little, I don't know if Vancouverites would consider this a suburb because it's still in the city, but it has a bit of a suburban quiet feel to it. And so since I can't go out and meet people and talk to them on the street like what I usually do, what I've started doing here is I have a daily photo walk by myself, obviously, and I specifically focus on very calm, intentional observation of very small things that I usually would walk right past on my search for an interesting human. That could be the way that the sun makes the shadow hit a certain wall. That could be a certain plant. It could be even little animals that I see different places. So I'm just going really slow, very calm, focus on the small wonders really of the world, that when we stop and pay attention, we can actually see. And I'm not so good at stopping to pay attention, but this project is all about that. So it's been calming, therapeutic in that sense. And it's been really fun too, because it's a very different way of shooting for me, both on a technical level, because I'm shooting it completely black and white, and pretty underexposed, and also on a conceptual level, because usually I'm like run fast, kind of hunting for interesting subjects, and now it's completely the opposite. So that's what I'm working on at the moment, while that's kind of what I've made out of what we can do right now.
How fun. And are
Yeah.
you just one of the things that I'm trying to do right now is while people are confined is come up with like how do you stay creative? How do you really exercise those creative muscles and maybe even talk through the process a little like you were saying you're like looking for shadows, but talking through the process of what that looks like for you. Like if somebody else is going like, I don't know, I've lived here for so long. I've seen the same streets. Are you walking the same street every day? Are you choosing a different street? How are you then approaching it to like make it interesting for maybe it? Can you know
Right.
what I'm going with
Well,
that?
it's a pretty small neighborhood, so while I'm not walking the exact same street every single day, I'm walking the same streets every couple of days. So I've certainly walked every street so far in this area at least like 5 times. But the light is always different, and plants grow. This is a neighborhood that has, as you can see behind me, that's a lot of plants. And so one of the cool things is also the fact that I get to see the neighborhood change as this season progresses. So there's this there's this one fence that's a couple of houses down from where I am, that is like a wooden fence, and there's these. I actually don't know what the type of flower is. It's kind of a tulip-esque flower, but it's not a tulip, and it's growing right in front of the fence. And I've been seeing that go from like just little leaves that are like this to now it's like leaves that are this big, and like even way higher above that are like buds of flowers that are about to come out. So things are changing. It's not like the world stands still just because we have to, so um but to go to your question as far as like how I approach it, I think the key to photography, the way I experience it, is about noticing, and not about gear, not about film stocks, not about lenses, not about concept even. It's about stopping to notice things. And I forget who told me this, but some photographer that I interviewed for my Observers project um, told me that you should always be taking photos. I wish I remember who said this, but I can look it up later. You should always be taking photos, even if you don't have a camera on you. Like with your eyes, you can see. Oh, look at that! Click in your head. Just like practice the noticing of a special little vignette or moment or person or plant or whatever it might be. So it's all about training your eye to pay attention and notice, because we do walk the same streets in our lives all the time, or we are in the same home all the time, and we think that everything is, we've seen it all, but that's just not the case. There's so much, we are so little, the world is so big, and within the big world we have our little neighborhoods, and it's infinite. So that's I would encourage people to not be lazy, and to like focus on finding new things rather than thinking, oh, I must take a trip to Japan to find new things. No, there's actually, I mean, that's great too. I love Japan, but there's amazing things even in this plant behind me. Like every small thing has a story.
Yeah, it's one of those I had a photo teacher that really he tried to pound into us is like the being able to see the same thing in different ways, shooting it with like if you usually shoot with the 50 millimeter lens, try to put on a 70 to 200 or a 200 millimeter
Right.
lens or a 35 millimeter lens, those little things where it's like having the same subject material but doing something different with that, whether that's a different time of day, whether that's a different like outfit, whether that's a different camera medium, like all those different things, they really affect how you're actually capturing that thing, right?
Right. And I actually would also flip it. I would say, sure, you can put on a different lens, but you could also not. You could also say, I believe that limitations encourage creativity. And so this whole project that I mentioned earlier, I'm shooting it with one camera, one lens. I mean, the camera doesn't even take another lens. You can only there's only one lens on it. My first big project was called One of Many, which was, I worked on it for about a year, and it was portraits of creative people around the United States in 12 different cities. And it was about 600 different creatives from old to young and all different disciplines. And I shot that entire project on one camera body and one lens, because I didn't have any other, one, and two, because sometimes that's just enough. That was a 35 millimeter lens, and that's great for environmental portraiture. And I think it's easy for us who have the privilege of sometimes buying a new camera or a new lens. It's easy for us to fall into that gear acquisition syndrome, GAS, because there's always something exciting and new. And I do it too. Like, I've been looking at a Fuji GFX 50R for 3 months. I shouldn't buy that camera. It's an incredible camera. I have enough cameras, so it's like, it's so alluring for us to think, oh, if I had another camera, if I had another lens, if I whatever, I have a friend who has been shooting for several years. My friend Harvey Hale, her Instagram is Harvey Hale, at Harvey Hale, Hale, and she shoots everything on, I think, on a Spotmatic, a Pentax Spotmatic 35 millimeter. I would say she has a 50 millimeter lens. That's my guess, and I think she shoots everything on Color Plus. But she's building a body of work. There's something to be said for consistency, and developing a style through your creativity rather than through camera after camera after camera. Again, I have a lot of cameras. I shouldn't be talking here, but principally, I do agree with that. I always try to, especially when someone talks to me who's new to photography or new to film photography, they're always like, "What should be my second lens?" And I'm like, "You just got this lens like a month ago." I always say, if you just got your first camera, don't get another lens for like a year. Just focus on understanding the camera and understanding the lens and like what you can do with it. And if it's a film camera, just stick with one type of stock for a while, so that you at least understand what's going on and what it is that you're doing and how you're affecting the stock. And there's so much time. You can always try other things later, but don't hop around too much.
Yeah, no, that's huge, because a good old Canon AE1, which you can get for like $150, or you can find them for less. And I mean, what were you shooting when we were in New York? Do you remember?
When we were hanging out?
Yeah.
I was shooting with a Pentax LX,
right,
which has a similar form factor to the Canon AE1.
Exactly. So there's these cameras. I actually did a video like way early in the channel where it was comparing a camera I got for $5 versus a camera that would have, a couple $1,000s. And it's like, can you really tell the difference? And it's like, you don't need really expensive gear. Some expensive gear is really, really great, but
of course,
you don't need it to take an amazing photo.
Well, what I always like to remember is that if you have a photographic hero of the past, let's say Henri Cartier-Bresson or anyone else from that era or later, their gear, if you would put their gear on a website like a B&H, and you do the comparison of like this camera versus that camera, whatever new camera that you have now has probably higher specs than the one that they shot their legendary never-ending work that will last forever on. So don't think that the specs and the gear are really the most important thing. Sure, having a good camera helps, but having a good camera with not much of a point of view doesn't get you much, and having a kind of not great camera but a great point of view, that can make you last forever.
100%. During this time, I mean, a lot of people have been, what I've been trying to do is encourage them to this is a perfect time. We've been given this gift of time, really, where we have the ability to work on a lot of the things that we can't work on when we're super busy, right? Because a lot of times, most people are complaining about how busy they are, so they can't go work on their website. They can't go work on this. Where now we sort of don't have that excuse, where we have the ability to go back and really curate and cull through stuff and clean house in personal life, business, websites. But are you working on any of that stuff?
Yeah, I took a significant amount of time to work on several of those things, and I've been writing about it for my newsletter, which is called Process, because I write about the process of being a photographer. And I actually, just like you said, I got way too busy. I did my first issue a few months ago, which was this long piece about how I got to meet Bruce Davidson and photograph him and his wife in their house, and I got to tour his dark room. And then my intention, and I stated it too, was every 2 weeks I'm going to do a newsletter. And then I got so overwhelmingly busy, and then COVID hit, and all of a sudden we're like several months later, and I hadn't sent out a second issue yet. But like you said, we have all this time now to like put towards things that we usually push away, like website is what one thing, like portfolio, backing up your stuff, all that kind of stuff. And so the next issue of Process comes out tomorrow, and it's a full breakdown of one of those things that I did now that I had the time for it, which is build a completely new portfolio from scratch. I built a whole portfolio for a few meetings that I had just before this hit, and I fine-tuned it since then. And it's all portraiture that I took in the last year or so, specifically around editorial portraiture. So I break down each step of the process, and then I show the portfolio as well. So that comes out tomorrow on Saturday. And if anyone is interested in that, the website for signing up is readprocess.co.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll have a link down below for y'all to click on, and also I think I'm able to make it show up right there.
Right there?
Yeah.
Or right here?
Right there. Just before we let you go, can we talk about the Observers and what you're doing with that?
Yes. My friend Paul John and I started that about a little over a year ago. And the thought behind that was, while we are fans of the online world of sharing photography and studying and learning, we're both, we love what you can do on Instagram. We love what you can do on different learning platforms. We just want to make sure that people remember, especially the youngest photographers that are all freshly now coming to film photography with the point and shoots and whatever else they're picking up, that photo books are like super valuable learning tools and ways to develop your voice. So while it's great to look at work on the computer or on the phone, there's a whole nother way that your brain looks at images. If you're looking at a book right in front of you and you're just staring at the work, you can analyze the composition better. You can get a real tactile feel for the tones. There's just something special about photo books. And so we thought, well, how can we remind people or introduce some people to the power and the beauty of photo books? Well, one thing that we saw that was missing was like, well, there's such an overwhelming amount of photo books. How am I supposed to know which photo book to pick up? So we thought, okay, we should do something around the recommendation of like the best photo books. And then I realized what I wanted to know was, okay, so I have all these beautiful photo books by various photographers who I admire. Like, let's say an Alex Soth, right? I look at Alex Soth book and I'm like, wow, that's incredible. I want to know what photo books was Alex Soth reading when he was making this work, or before that, which influenced him. So why not talk to Alex Soth? Why not talk to Bruce Davidson? Why not talk to Elliot Erwitt? I mean, not that that's so easy, but due to my various projects, I've been able to interact with some of these people, and luckily all of these legends are also huge fans of photo books and the importance of photo books. So they all very generously gave me some time, and I interviewed, at this point, I think it's about 60 photographers about which photo books inspired their work. So the kind of the question that we have for them is like, hey, you inspire us. Who inspired you? And we channel that through photo books. And then Paul and I built a website around that, and we're preparing the third season, which we're really excited about, and that will come with a full redesign. I don't think we've mentioned that to anyone yet, but it's going to be a fully redesigned website with a whole new season of interviews and book recommendations. So, but at the moment, there's already, I think, about 60 interviews up there, and I think between the 60 of them, we have about 300 recommended photo books. And not just like, hey, get this book, but Alex Soth said, this is what he got out of this book. This is why this book was important, or how it influenced him. So that's, to me, super interesting, and we found that a lot of people responded to it, so we're excited to keep it going.
What a killer resource. Where can people find that?
That's just at theobservers.co. And then there's also an Instagram account for that, which is just at theobservers. And that will start up again with the new season, and I think maybe in about 6 weeks or so, depending on how fast we can build the new iteration of the website.
Rad. Well, thanks so much for just sharing and inspiring some people to get out there and go on some photo walks and think creatively. But good to see your face. Glad you're doing well. And yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
No problem. And you have a great day, man.
All right, you too. What a treat to have heard from Wesley, and I really love that idea that he talked about how limitations can really breed creativity. And we're limited right now, and so how can you take those limitations and go be creative with it, shoot the same thing in different ways, and have fun with it? So with that process, would love to know from you, if you could leave some comments below. Did you like this? Do you want to hear more of this? Who do you want to hear from? And what did you learn? What are you doing? Would just like keep conversation coming, but really would love to be featuring people that you want to hear from or topics you want to hear about. Thanks so much for watching. We will catch you on the next one.